Hi, welcome to Lesson 22a, Experimental Probability. The goal of today's lesson is to begin to understand what is meant by experimental probability. So the word probability probably isn't too foreign to you, but it refers to the chance or the likelihood that an event will occur. So we can talk about things in sports, perhaps like some probability in sports or probability in politics, the percentage or the probability that a certain candidate may win. Economics, there's probability. There's some in science, business, quality assurance when dealing with production of some sort of products for sale. So there's lots of areas where there's probability, and we're going to be exploring a lot of these in the next couple chapters. When we discuss probability, we talk about it as either a percent or as a decimal. 0 represents that the event has no chance of occurring at all, so it's impossible that it's going to occur. And 1 or 100% is the fact that the event will definitely occur. 0.5 is when the event has equal chance of happening or not occurring. When we get, maybe the 2/3 of the way along the positive side here, the event is likely to happen, is very likely to happen as you get closer to 1. And then on the other side of the 0.5, it's not likely to happen, these 2/3 here, and then this final bit, it's very unlikely to happen. But not quite impossible, because impossible is 0. Okay, so the values are assigned based on observing the results of an experiment. So that's an experimental probability. So we're talking about maybe flipping a coin or pulling out colored marbles from a bag or something like that. Or we can assign these values by using arguments of symmetry, where we use theoretical probability. And the theoretical probability is based on the experimental probability. Okay, but we'll be getting into that a little bit later on as we proceed through the chapter. A little bit of terminology. The number of trials is the total number of times the experiment is repeated. And we call it an experiment if we're talking about flipping a coin or drawing cards from a deck. The act of flipping the coin is a trial. The act of pulling a card from a deck is a trial. And the number of trials is the number of times you do that. The outcomes, those are the different possible results for one trial of the experiment. So the different possible results of flipping a coin, for example, the outcomes of flipping a coin, there are 2 of them, either heads or tails. The outcomes, the different possible outcomes of rolling a die, a normal 6-sided die, there are 6 outcomes. If the number 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 ends up on top, then those would be the different possible outcomes. The frequency is the number of times that a particular outcome is observed. So if we're talking about the number of heads when we're flipping a coin, the frequency is the number of heads that we observe when we go through a certain number of trials. Suppose we flip a coin 50 times. We want to see the frequency of the heads that occur, and that would give us the number of times that a head has landed up. And the relative frequency then is the frequency of an outcome expressed as a fraction or percentage of the total number of trials. So the frequency of flipping a coin, for example, getting tails, suppose it's 20 times that we get tails, and the number of trials was 50, so the relative frequency would be 20 over 50. Okay, so that would be what we would use for relative frequency. So that's basically all there is to experimental probability at this stage. There will be we'll get a little bit deeper into the concept as we go. But tomorrow we're going to do a couple of experiments in class using the TI-84 calculator, and then we'll go through an example or two, And that's about it for 22A. So the exercises that we will do after doing the investigations tomorrow will be on page 570, number 1 to 4. But in the meantime, sit back and relax and check out video lesson 22B.